have viruses at all. I mean, what kind of God, supreme being, would design a world, a universe with those kinds of things in them?
Yes, that's perhaps the most common question from skeptical and atheistic people. It goes back to David Hume, if the Scottish Enlightenment philosopher. If God is all good, then he can't be all powerful because he isn't doing anything. And if he's all powerful, he can't be good because he's not doing anything either. And so we argue, and we all did it, especially those of us who've been students, the midnight oil, asking surely a good God would, could, ought to have done this and that. Why couldn't God have made a world that doesn't fracture? Now, as I hinted earlier, there are two questions behind this. There's, first of all, moral fracture, as happened when Pilate slaughtered those people sacrificing in the temple. But then there seems to be a concomitant breakdown in physical nature. So we get thorns and thistles. And this is a huge topic that the Bible addresses, and there are very deep questions associated with it. But sufficient to say, what we observe is fractured moral nature and fractured physical nature. And so we asked, couldn't God make fire that heated but didn't burn, and all this kind of stuff? And there's a trite answer to that. Let's take it at the personal level first. Could God not make creatures that didn't sin, didn't do wrong? Well, of course he could. We call them robots. And he could have made an automatic world, but then we wouldn't have been in it. And that's the problem, Michael. When we say, oh, we long for a world where none of us could do any wrong, well, there'd be no humans in it, because the most precious thing about us is our capacity to choose. We're thinking of its negative side. But if you want to have love, then you've got to have a certain capacity to say yes or no. If you remove that and make us all automata, then no human beings in the world. So we're wishing ourselves out of existence. So what do I do with all this? I say we're never going to solve that question. Why? Because as we look now at physical nature, we see a mixed picture. I often call it beauty and barbed wire, but I might as well call it beauty and COVID-19. We see a mixed picture, and no religion or philosophy that doesn't accept that will ever wash with the majority of people. So we've got to accept that. Now, I accept it. So what do? I say there's another question that needs to be asked. And that other question is this: granted that it's like that, which we have to do, is there any evidence anywhere that there is a God that we could trust with it? Now, that's a huge thing to ask of anybody, especially now where we're asked to trust people. You and I are sitting locked down. Why is that? Because we've trusted the government. We've trusted the medical statisticians and epidemiologists. We're asking for people who will show real leadership and trust. And we encourage them and pray for them and all that kind of thing, and we've got to trust them. But is there a God whom we can trust with this question, that in the end we can leave it to him, not in some blind leap of faith way, but because there's evidence that he's trustworthy? Now, this story that I've talked about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, gives us some insight into the heart of God. That is, if we believe, as I do, that Jesus is the Son of God. But the cross of Christ, which is the heart of Christianity, and we're talking at Easter time, it's the heart of Christianity. And this is, if Jesus is the Son of God, this is God suffering. This is a God who suffers. And what does it tell me? Well, at the very simplest reading of it, it tells me that God has not remained distant from our human suffering, but has himself become part of it. And then the hope bit, you mentioned hope. The hope bit comes with the fact that it didn't end there. If the story had ended there, we'd never have heard about it, nor would we have had the story of Lazarus. But God raised Jesus from the dead on the third day at that ancient Easter time. And that changes everything. In the sense, Michael, that it tells me that death is not the end. Now, of course, you and I know, and there's loads on the RZIM website and my website dedicated to the whole question of evidence for the resurrection. But just taking that to my mind is the fundamental key to everything to bring us hope. It's no guarantee that we won't die even of COVID-19, but it is a guarantee that those that put their trust in Christ rather than their own merit, they will one day, as Christ was, be raised from the dead.